it should be coming as a shocking wave to WPPJ?
Mr. Aze, it's beyond shocking. I think we are outraged. Yet again, we are bearing a son. There are children somewhere coming home without a dad, without an uncle. There is a mother somewhere who will soon bury another son. So this is again calls for an outrage on any woman out there and any person, not only of Southern Cameroon extraction, but throughout the construct called Cameroon, that we need to collectively be outraged. There are several questions Babila raised here. Why would an innocent civilian be executed by ostensibly a professional military? Someone known in the area, someone going about his business, and by the way, no riots were registered in that area. So how is it that we have an execution in broad daylight? Is this yet another guilty by being, quote, a male and an amber in the Southern Cameroon? So these are some of the questions, Mr. Aze. And while we are on the subject, it is not an abuse, as you pointed out at the top of your show. It is a moral outrage. Number one, the area is militarized. Our civilian communities are militarized. Our airports are now military bases. The justice system is militarized and weaponized. And by the way, our audience need to understand unequivocally that Cameroon lacks the legal framework to prosecute atrocity crimes as the execution of Mr. Jibril going about its business. Cameroon only recognizes atrocity and torture in its legal system. And that is why Women for Permanent Peace and all the mothers who are again going to dig a grave and put a child in must not look at this as an abuse, but atrocity crime and crimes against humanity. And this calls for all those, and I use some harsh words here, our brothers and sisters who are so-called elites. I call them apologists for Bia, or Bia apologists, to recognize that the military, professional military, has not issued a statement, not on the execution of Mr. Jibril Dubaye, not on the execution the last time of women and children, during which the Prime Minister, Dion Gute, was out on his peace tour. On this execution, where does that leave us, Mr. Aze? That we are dealing with a country that is not open, it's closed to everything and attached to fixed solution. The solution that it can indeed win a military war against a people with legitimate concerns. Let me stop here by saying this is not new. We have seen young girls, juveniles in Kumba, principally Miriam Echi and Sandra Ashu, one of them at least a minor, remanded in the first instance court in Kumba to adult systems, penal systems, without the benefits of legal guardian, a legal counsel, and even if they do, children are supposed to be protected. These are minors, ostensibly, reported to be raped or defiled by other male, and the males without any presumption of innocence by the simple fact they are male, are amber, and therefore subject to execution. What country are we living in?
So the magistrates of the Kumba Court of First Instance says these two minors, they committed an offense by not reporting. They have an idea of those who killed the 7 children at the Mother Francisca International Academy, but they failed to report to the competent authorities the reason why they have to face the law. And the same government authorities have been saying our laws are very effective, despite the fact that Cameroonians say we have good laws, but we do not enforce them. Is it not, are these children not supposed to be facing trial?
in a banana republic do you find a child under 18 with an adult male, and you do not consider that defilement of a child, and therefore that child is to be protected in the first instance? Secondly, in a situation of war, as our cities, towns, and hamlets are militarized, those children under international convention must be protected. Cameroon is signatory to several conventions and has not lived up to any one of them. These girls are minor, they are our children, and every mother should not lay quiet in their beds, calling for these children, first, not to be in an adult penal system. Number two, where victims, first and foremost, of defilement, i.e. raped, and therefore must be produced and protected. Secondly, Mr. Aze, the victims in this context, the young man killed was again executed on the presumption that, quote, they are amber, and that the gun was recovered. I ask you, Mr. Aze, has the people in the construct called Cameroon seen the forensic evidence that marries the gun recovered after executing a male amber in the company of a minor to the bullets recovered from the victims of Mother Francisca gruesome massacre, who were, by the way, refused to be given to the families? Has there been any forensic marrying of evidence collected in a subsequent, quote, case of accessory after the fact? We haven't seen that. All we know is that if you are male, you are subject to execution on the pretext of being amber under any condition that they deem necessary, and on top of that, plant evidence to make the case in the public eye that of, quote, terrorists. We must decry this, as our collective consciences and humanity is at risk. We must call this a desperate attempt by the regime to conceal the real perpetrator of the gruesome murder of February 14th in Garbo, as we know, and in October 24th at Mother Francisca International Academy. There has been to date no witness produced, Mr. Aze, that can say these young men found with minors are the same one who perpetrated this crime. And oh, by the way, let's just be clear, in our moral outrage, which is definitely clearly one we need to continue to project. A gruesome crime is committed. The perpetrator stroll down the street from the scene of the murder down to Kusala and take refuge in the bedrooms of minor, as if nothing happened. This is all attempts to conceal and to label any male a victim, and for the regime in Yaoundé, Mr. Aze, to deny presenting itself in good faith under the sweet process for a mediated solution to this 5-year-long crisis. It is clear that the regime in Yaoundé, through its, as I call, apologists for the BR regime, are willing to use all and every means within their power of state power to deny our people a sense of true peace and justice. That is why we are not only abused through the killing, as you mentioned in your report earlier, it is an outrage and a complete assault on our collective humanity that no mother, no father, no child should have to bury a loved one. We need to call for a demilitarization of our cities, our towns, and our hamlets. We need to call for the end and for the government of President Biya to assent to the UN call for a ceasefire as a first point of departure. So that real peace, the peace that Mr. John Gute says he wants, which, by the way, I don't believe he truly does, because he would tell his government to sit down with the armed groups under the Swiss-led process and dialogue so we can achieve real solutions. Right now, we are working towards the peace of the graveyard, and every mother out there should deny that kind of peace.
Okay, Dr. Emma, you mentioned of demilitarization of civilian localities, but the government says the military, they are there to protect lives and properties. Why should these localities be demilitarized? Don't you think it would be endangering lives of civilians if they go back to their barracks? We know very well that there are many persons out there in so many groups who move around with guns terrorizing the population. Don't you think that will be a potential threat to lives of the civilians in the two English-speaking regions?
Mr. Azel, let's be clear about something. If there are no thugs in your neighborhood, most people have no need for 10-foot high fences. If you do not have defilement of your property, stealing, you'll have no need for security systems. The very fact of a militarized southern Cameroon is itself a provocation. The fact that your mother, the fact that Mr. Jibril is killed, what does that do to the young people in that area? We saw that yesterday. The rising up of youth to say enough is enough. The military is creating the problem, promoting the existence of a situation where it is peace at the barrel of the gun, acquiescence, or patronage. True peace suggests
against one party. You are forgetting to mention also those who have picked up arms against the states. Are they not causing atrocities as well? Are they not killing?
Them violence on both sides, be it Bias Bill, trained by the Israeli and funded by the United States, all the armed groups, however they get their arms. We must totally stand against atrocity crimes, no matter who perpetrates it. But Mr. Aze, you must recall that it is the government, through the territorial administrator, minister, who called for militias to be formed. And what did we have after that call? The Garbo massacre. The state party has the moral grounds and is bound by international conventions to do the right thing by its population. He who wears the crown bears the greater responsibility here. Children would never, ever have picked up arms to fight. They picked up peace plans. Here we are in a full-scale war. It is to ascend to a ceasefire, demilitarize the area, so the tempers are cool, and we submit the parties who are now the belligerents to dialogue and address the root causes. There will be no peace if there is continuous aggression or even perception of aggression. The killings of yesterday does nothing to further the cause of Mr. Dion Gute with his peace plan. It simply says we are being exterminated. And I use that word without doing so lightly. The Shea and Sika families do not exist in Garbo, but it was through the army and the militia seeking out who they call a terrorist that we ended up with this very unfortunate situation that has only caused an escalation. Yesterday's rally by the masses may very well be the tipping point. But what does a professional army does? It shoots an innocent civilian and never issues a statement. There's always cover up.
If there's time for that, they are taking the time, of course, to come up with a clear statement regarding some of the atrocities they are labeling on the military, the professional military, so speak. But now, before we go out, let's talk about the ceasefire, cessation of fire. as demanded by the United Nations. According to you, a founder of Women for Permanent Peace and Justice, who should cease fire today?
Both sides. Some of the armed groups have ascended to Antonio Guterres' global call for a ceasefire. The government has yet to ascend to that global call, even in the midst of fighting pandemic. And let's not go there because we will divert and talk about COVID gate. We at the level of what I call frontline victims, those at home who may not be able to advocate for themselves, and those of us away who have the ability to advocate, must call the government under President Biya's command that they are parties to, they are part of the United Nations system. Why are they not ascending to the global call for ceasefire? Why has La République refused to submit itself to the internationally backed peace process under Switzerland, Geneva? Mr. Azeh, you would find out on social media today's articles from a journal called Le Temps Afrique, I guess it's Africa Times, essentially saying that the peace process is dead or non-existent. But let's take very quickly why that's the case. Mr. Dion Gute is clearly the obstructionist here, refusing to participate in the process. Meanwhile, as we know, some of them want rather to use the intelligence sources to go into individual negotiations with individuals on the other side. That does not make for a peace process. The international community, yes, is frustrated, as are the armed groups that I understand are under a coalition called the Amazonia Coalition Team, willing to speak with Yaoundé. But that frustration is clearly justified because, again, unwilling to cease hostilities, believing that there is a possible solution that is military, continues to give a sense that there is no reason to talk to these armed groups. Our children have taken up arms. The question is why? I think at this juncture, 5 years in, we know why. The problem is now to ask, who has the greatest incentive not to cease fire? Who has the greatest incentive not to engage in an internationally backed peace process, but rather creating and fomenting the maximum division that says there is some other coalition that we can support? If you believe in that coming out of Yaoundé and not the Swiss process, you're simply saying that the grievances, the justified grievances of the people of Southern Cameroon is just but a minority issue in the larger problem facing this construct called Cameroon, be it from Boko Haram to the east, to the south, to the northwest, and to the Nozo. As long as you do that, you're not going to be addressing the root causes. So I think if there is anything we all can collectively agree on, is that the Biya regime clearly is closed to the possibility that it cannot continue to militarize our zone and get a victory outright from the people who clearly are embattled and now executed just for being male. That is, it defies imagination. One time, you understand.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emma.